Every culture has its own folklore, stories and figures that reflect their values, beliefs, and fears. Around the world, folk and fairy tales talk of witches, demons, magic, and morals. Some of these folk tales have been passed down through centuries, and modern storytellers are still adapting them in new ways. And when these stories are translated to film, artists have to employ special effects and animation to bring that fantasy to life. So today I want to show you 5 films that keep the magic of folktales alive. Let's start with some Soviet folk horror from 1967. Inspired by a novella by the same name, V is the story of a philosopher, a witch, and 3 nights of supernatural terror. The film opens outside a Kiev seminary, just as a group of pious young men are sent home for the holiday, and off they go. Early on, I want to say how nice this film looks, from the shot choices to the way the landscape looks both dreary and lush as the young men make their way home. But that night, the boys get lost, in desperate search of a nearby village. With strange sounds in the air, they decide that camping in the field is not an option. They stumble upon the home of an elderly woman, and after some protest, she lets them in, provided they all sleep in different rooms. We focus on one of the men, Koma, as he makes his bed in a pile of hay, which doesn't look comfortable at all. The boys have all been shown to be a little mischievous at this point, but as Koma settles in, he kicks a pig for no reason at all, so he falls way short of being likable. But before he can fall asleep, in walks the old lady, and she arrives with intent. He tries turning her down, but she sticks around to press the matter. Koma tries to back out, but is that a yoke? A saddle? And before he realizes what's happening, the old lady mounts Koma and takes off, riding him like a horse, and then they're airborne.
Can you read my mind?
At this point, Koma realizes he's dealing with a witch. He orders her down in the name of God, and when they land, he gets the upper hand and begins to beat her. But then she transforms, lying before him as a beautiful woman who pleads him to stop. Shocked, Koma hightails it back to the seminary, where he learns that a young woman out in the country is dying, and she's called him by name to come out to the farm and perform her last rites. So with no say in the matter, Koma sets out to return to the same farmland where he wandered lost last night. And Koma seems to be subjugated at every turn in this film. First, the witch rides him like a horse, then all the men he interacts with after that corral him and order him around. The rector orders him on his mission. His escorts keep him from escaping, and later we see that the dying woman's father orders him to fulfill her request under threat of torture. And so Koma is escorted by a mustached band of men in their covered wagon. They stop at a tavern for some drinks, and as the night goes on, the drinks take hold. We haven't gotten to the film's most well-known imagery yet, but I do enjoy the tipsy visuals in this scene. V is celebrated for its special effects, and the best are yet to come. Wait, who was the DD here? Anyway, when they get to the farm, they find that the woman is already dead. Her loved ones ask Koma how he and the woman knew each other, but when he sees the body, he realizes that she's the witch whom he had just beat to death the other night, so he denies ever knowing her. But he's still required to stay and pray over her for 3 nights. And so her body is taken to the chapel. This is where Koma must stay each night, and it's also where the film's horror truly breaks the surface. Koma speaks to himself to steel his nerves against the fear mounting in his mind, but he worries that there may be supernatural forces at work within the chapel, and for 3 nights, the woman's body rises to terrify Koma. This takes the philosopher by surprise, and he draws a magic circle around himself for protection. If you look closely, you can see a faint circle on the ground already. Evidently, this was not their first take. That's okay, this isn't my first take either. But the barrier seems to work, and the witch is unable to see Koma. However, he's still terrified to be stuck in the chapel with the undead witch. She continues wandering with sightless eyes until the rooster crows at daybreak. The next evening, Koma finishes dinner and resolves to return to the chapel without fear, saying that a Cossack should fear nothing. Round 2. Tonight the holy man is nervous, but the witch is ready. Some of the shots in this scene look great, just great, while others are a little bit dated, but at any rate the magic circle holds strong and Koma lives another night. On the 3rd night, Koma prays with fervor, but the witch has something special planned. She conjures all kinds of wicked things, creeping creatures, vampires, and werewolves. And this is the sequence the movie is known for, when all hell breaks loose. But that's not all. Fed up with searching for the invisible Koma, the witch calls upon something known as V, and this hefty troll man stomps in, his eyelids hanging heavy over his eyes. The creatures lift his lids to give him sight, and he spots Koma. Then the holy man is surrounded. I'll let you see what happens next on your own. I want people to see these movies for themselves, so there's a lot I'm leaving out. I don't want to spoil it. And if you're interested in Soviet-era filmmaking or Ukrainian folklore, I think there's a lot to glean from this story. Like the power dynamics of the seminary and the wealthy man on the farm, the role of faith and superstition, is fertile ground for interpretation. This was considered the first horror film released in the Soviet Union, and it's interesting to see how religion and mysticism were portrayed given that the government was so against religious belief. The holy man gallivants with a witch, drinks excessively, and runs out on his duties. And the witch does what we're told witches do. She deceives, undermines patriarchal power, and consorts with evil forces. But what about the V itself? Where did this thing come from? Well, the whole film was inspired by a novella by Nikolai Gogol. While the writer drew from various aspects of regional folklore for various elements, it seems as if the V itself was a new creation. We see that the witch and her intercessors are all blind to Koma in his magic circle, but in the story, V is capable of seeing everything. He just needs someone to lift his eyelids, and that's how they find Koma. Some critics say that Gogol might have taken the eyelid bit from other folktales or religious figures, and the story's ties to folklore likely allowed the film to be sanctioned in the first place. Without its roots in the culture itself, this supernatural horror movie may never have been permitted. I think it's a well-made film, and if you're looking for some Ukrainian folk horror, here you go. I hope you'll check it out, because the whole film is available for free right here on YouTube. Moving on. You know the story of Alice in Wonderland, and all the familiar characters are back for this Czech interpretation from 1988. Of course you have Alice, the White Rabbit, the Caterpillar, and the Mad Hatter. The gang's all here. The entire film flows along like a babbling stream of consciousness, events unfolding in strange dream logic as Alice chases the White Rabbit. And much of it is depicted in uncanny stop motion. So you might be familiar with Lewis Carroll's classic novel Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, or maybe you've seen the Disney film from the 1950s. It's surreal, kid-friendly fantasy. So what was going on in the mind of director Jan Švankmajer when he read that well-known story, turned around, and gave us this? Well, he explained it all in an interview with Electric Sheep magazine. So far, all adaptations of Alice present it as a fairy tale, but Carroll wrote it as a dream. And between a dream and a fairy tale, there is a fundamental difference. The difference, he says, is that fairy tales have morals, while dreams are an expression of the unconscious. My Alice is a realized dream. And so the dream begins with Alice throwing stones in a brook. When she runs out of rocks, she entertains herself by speed reading someone else's book, but she's quickly slapped on the wrist for it. And then she hits us with a Kubrick stare before we cut to the opening credits. After the titles, we find Alice at home, settled in for the night. The camera pans through her room and we see objects that may come up later in Švankmajer's patchwork wonderland. After throwing more rocks into a teacup, Alice calls it a night and gets ready to sleep by staring right into a bare light bulb. But the dreamlike adventure begins when she notices the White Rabbit stirring in her room, and in this case, the dream starts out like a taxidermist's nightmare. The rabbit flees into a desert that was just on the other side of the room, and Alice pursues. As she follows the rabbit, Alice finds a door that's too small for her to fit through. Maybe that's for the best. There are some strange sights ahead, but Alice seems like the most threatening thing in this wonderland. Just leave that rabbit alone. Relentless in her pursuit, she searches the room around her. Someone left an unmarked bottle of black liquid lying around, so Alice has a little taste. And what do you know, that's just what she needed to shrink down. But she forgot the key. She nibbles on a tart to overcorrect her height, but she's no closer to catching the rabbit. Changing in size is true to the novel, but it's depicted in this film with a transition to stop-motion animation. Alice eventually catches up with the White Rabbit in doll form, but the rabbit mistakes her for someone else and sends her off on a fetch quest for scissors. The wonderland of this film is such a uniquely realized place, filled with craft materials, random objects, and clutter, like it was lifted from the pages of an I Spy book. In one of these rooms, we find the home of the White Rabbit. I love the detail of the taxonomy card from his display case now serving as his address sign. And the tables turn when Alice finds another bottle in the rabbit's home and just can't help herself. The rabbit grows impatient with Alice and comes looking for her, so she barricades herself in the back room of his building block castle, and now he's hell-bent on getting to her. The rabbit's house is one of my favorite sets in this movie. The toy exterior and chicken coop rooms just seem so cozy and fitting. But anyway, the White Rabbit is not fooling around, so he calls for reinforcements. Dissatisfied with the fairy tale cheerfulness of the other adaptations, director Švankmajer set aside Wonderland's whimsy in favor of whatever this is. The rabbit's band of merry bone friends roll up in the skull wagon to show the little girl who's boss. This one's named Bill, but these stop-motion monsters are no match for a full-sized child, and Alice gives Bill the boot, which knocks the stuffing out of him. The inhabitants of Wonderland all seem to be handmade, both for the production and diegetically. We see them as puppets and taxidermy, but so does Alice. It makes this Wonderland a shade darker than other adaptations, but I don't think that does a disservice to the story. So Bill's broken and the animals decide that Alice must pay for this. To escape, she shrinks down again, but now she's far more vulnerable. She tries to run, but here's Johnny. The animals pour in, and we get a great look at all their weird, bony features, all made creepier by their jittery animation. Of course, puppets had been around for ages, but during the time of the Austrian Empire, puppet plays were one of the only forms of entertainment in the Czech language. Puppet theaters were also common toys, and Švankmajer had one of these when he was a child. Decades later, puppets were still his go-to outlet for creative expression. Anyway, Alice eventually escapes the animals and finds herself in Wonderland's trypophobia storage. Gross. With the sort of curiosity that would speedrun all 9 of a cat's lives, Alice searches the room. She opens a drawer in the most dangerous way possible to find a set of dentures and glassy eyes. These spare parts come together to make the caterpillar, with no hookah in sight. It must have quit smoking. It's still into shrooms though, and it offers 2 pieces of its mushroom to Alice. One makes you grow, while the other makes you shrink. We hear a baby crying from inside a tiny house, so Alice uses the mushrooms to gain entry. But before she can let herself in, there's a knock at the door. Oh hey! The fish footman brings her a letter from the Queen, an invitation just for Alice. Alice follows the source of the crying and finds the white rabbit, who's just there to feed the pig, and he's delighted to see her again. Alice lets the little pig loose and follows a set of stairs down to the basement, where only good things can happen. She opens the door and she's just in time for a tea party. We sit down with a mangy March hare and a nude Mad Hatter, and would you look at the time?
Wait, who's gonna put butter on a sausage?
So the Mad Hatter pulls a rabbit out of his hat, and it looks like the poor guy is still running late. Hey, let's get some butter on that. There you go. Time is quickly slipping by, maybe because of all that butter, and Alice becomes fed up with her hosts, so she bails on the tea party. The Mad Tea Party scene is usually a standout moment in other adaptations. I was surprised that in this film it seems outshined by all the other weirdness. There is an added layer of artifice to this tea party though. The March Hare is a wind-up doll that constantly has to be rewound, and the Mad Hatter is a puppet pulled by strings, but we don't ever get to see who's pulling them. Out in the stairwell, Alice continues to chase the rabbit right into the final sequence of the film. She wanders into a garden reminiscent of a puppet theater inhabited by the playing cards. The Queen of Hearts has been on a head-chopping spree, but she invites Alice to play croquet, and here we see some more live animals on set. Then Alice is handed a script, which she's ordered to memorize. That reminds me, the girl playing Alice is the only actor who speaks in the whole film. She narrates the voices and dialogue for all the animated characters. The script is for Alice's trial, where she's accused of eating the royal tarts, but Alice knows that the trial is a farce, so she doesn't follow the instructions. Realizing that the whole trial is out of order, she wakes up from her dream. Wide awake, she finds that the white rabbit's display is still broken and empty, but his scissors are hidden inside. Taking them in hand, she contemplates chopping off his head. She is a weird kid. Maybe you've already heard the old fairy tale of the Pied Piper of Hamelin, where a city is overrun with rats, but a mysterious musician offers to remove the vermin for a fee. But when the town refuses to pay, he plays a new tune to lead their children out of town, never to be seen again. This story changes in some surprising ways in the 1986 Czech stop-motion film Křižář. In an interview with Animator magazine, director Jiri Barta says he took inspiration from several versions of this tale, especially the novel by Czech author Viktor Dyk. So what did Barta do with his own take on the folktale? Well, the film begins with clockwork clanking and machinery. It's all part of an astronomical clock, passing time above the city of Hamelin. As Barta explains, it is an element of medieval philosophy, which is the basis for the story and organic part of the whole thing. It is a story about the fate, the destiny of a town, or a city if you wish, or a society. The Hamelin of this story seems like a miserable place. The townspeople are shown to be greedy, gluttonous, materialistic, and totally selfish. They nickel and dime each other, arguing over the cost of goods till they're red in the face. Money is at the heart of everything, and all their excesses invites an infestation of rats into every street, nook, and cranny. The rats get into everything, devouring the food and even draining the coffers while the townsfolk sleep. The infestation has turned the town on its head, but the piper approaches to alleviate the people's problems for a price. He demonstrates his particular set of skills, and the town nobles offer payment for a full extermination. And so he plays the rats out of town. As promised, the piper leads the rats to their death, playing a tune as they all plunge into the river, just as he did in the old story. Now this movie also adds a few things that were not in the old fairy tale. There's an unexpected attraction between the piper and the one person in town that isn't designed to look like a gargoyle. As the piper plays for her, we watch a painting take shape. Color gradually fills a pastoral scene evocative of Northern Renaissance paintings. But this lovely scene is not meant to last. One of the townsfolk has his eye on her, and after a night of debauchery, he decides that if he can't have her, no one can. Evidently, there are still vermin in the city, and despite never receiving proper payment, the piper returns to finish the job. So stop motion can be a huge undertaking, even for a short film. But this movie goes on for over 50 minutes, and the production involved more than 170 sets with 16 carved puppets, plus the little rat figures. The whole endeavor from prep to completion took around 2.5 years. A labor of love, to be sure. Watching this film, I wondered if the darker tone and graphic moments were a reflection of the director's view of Germany or Czech culture. But the director asserts that the people of his expressionist Hamlin are not meant to just represent any one society. Greed and selfishness are universal problems. Let's go back to Jan Švankmajer for a retelling of another classic German folktale. According to the centuries-old legend, Dr. Faust was a highly intelligent and successful man, but he was dissatisfied with his lot in life. And so he made a deal with the devil for earthly pleasures and forbidden knowledge. The devil's agent, Mephistopheles, arrived to accept the doctor's soul in exchange for a year of unlimited service. Plays retelling this legend were a part of the Czech puppet tradition, and when director Emil Radek decided to film the story of Faust, he called Švankmajer to puppeteer, fresh after his graduation from the Academy of Performing Arts in Prague. Švankmajer makes the act of puppetry a part of his films. We see the hands, the edges of the stage, the strings. I love how they're used in this transition. And now we find the Dr. Faust deliberating. He's torn between pious and high-minded pursuits and the pleasures of the flesh. As he contemplates, we get an amusing dance sequence, but soon it's time to make a decision. He's not satisfied to live in obscurity, and the good life calls to him. It's only a signature away. And with a lash of flames, he signs in blood. The devil obliges, and Faust now has Mephistopheles and a legion of spirits at his command. His newfound power and fame spreads across Europe, and the doctor is invited to demonstrate his necromancy for the King of Portugal. The original Faust lived in the 1500s, when necromancy was a popular but contentious subject. Magicians could thrill a crowd by performing optical illusions where they appeared to conjure spirits. It was all smoke and mirrors, but it appealed to a public fascination with the supernatural. But by the end of the century, someone like Faust might find himself on trial for witchcraft. But the King of Portugal is amazed by Faust's parlor tricks, at least at first. We enjoy a light-hearted tableau for a while. Dancing puppets, jugglers, that sort of thing. But the mood shifts when Faust depicts the story of David and Goliath. His magic act allows devils into the garden, and the royal court is terrified. The king draws his sword against the demon, but this enrages Faust, and the doctor conjures up a flood. There's nowhere for the king's court to run. Upon his return home, Faust finds that he's still not satisfied, and all the earthly pleasures he was promised mean nothing to him. That night, he has horrible Jan Švankmajer nightmares. Deep down, he knows that the end is near, and the deal he made was not worth it. And when he awakes, he resists the devil. Then Faust falls to his knees to pray for redemption. But even as he tries to repent, Faust falls for temptation one last time, and he has fallen for death in disguise. Oh hey, somebody put that out. Then the devils surround him, and that's the end of Dr. Faust. And this is not Švankmajer's only outing with the story of Dr. Faust. In 1994, he returned to the legend for his second feature film, again combining puppets with live action. Let's visit Japan for our last folktale adaptation. Oni is a stop-motion short that follows two brothers and their elderly mother. It takes inspiration from traditional styles of Japanese theater, like kabuki as well as bunraku, a form of puppet theater. Bunraku features hand-carved puppets, and some are designed to transform into demons on stage. Keep that in mind. And an Oni is a troublesome spirit, and the film's English title is simply The Demon, if that gives you an idea of what's coming. In this story, the two brothers leave their mother at home one day to head out into the woods, but they notice that something is watching from the darkness around them. And as they go deeper into the forest, a hand reaches from the trees and grabs one brother by the top knot. The other brother cuts him free, and they declare that the severed hand must belong to a demon. And sure enough, on the return home, they encounter the Oni, who dances with the bloody appendage. Now, if you're familiar with oh, there he goes. So this story is based off a folktale which warns that under certain conditions, human beings might turn into demons. It feels like the story ends rather abruptly, but remember, some of these old folktales were designed this way. They lead up to a sudden, startling conclusion to leave you reeling in surprise. I hope you can forgive me for any words I might have mispronounced today. It wasn't perfect, but I tried. I also hope that you'll watch these films for yourself. Watching a video about them just won't do them justice. I know I summarized a lot in this video, and that's not something I like to do often. But if you enjoyed it, let me know and stick around. I've got a lot more to say about movies and literature, especially horror. And I'll have a new book review coming up very soon, and plenty more after that, so stay tuned. Bye for now.
A teď už mě nechte v klidu spát.